All right, so here's the deal. When I was young, didn't read at all. Any book report we had, never read a page of it, just fudged the oral presentation. I wasn't a reader at all. But the older I get, and now that I'm done with high school, I'm done with college, I've actually developed quite the appreciation for reading. I think it was just because school tried to force you to read something that they wanted to in order to fit a curriculum. And maybe it wasn't that I didn't like reading, it's that I just didn't like people telling me what to do. So now that I'm reading and I'm reading the things that I actually want to read, it's an incredibly enjoyable experience, and you learn so much from it, believe it or not. For 2021, I set a goal for myself to read 8 different books and then reread 4 books. And I've also made a goal for myself to listen to 12 different audiobooks as well, kind of hitting on the same concept, but really the reading portion, flipping the pages, the physical book, is the more important thing. But anyway, that's enough rambling. What is the first book review today? The book that we are reviewing today is Limitless by Jim Kwik. So for any of you who don't know, Jim Kwik is essentially a brain coach. So what he does, he's like a personal trainer for people's brains. So he'll go through this in the book if you do read it. But essentially, Jim was diagnosed with a traumatic brain injury when he was a child. He hit his head in a terrible accident, and he had a lot of difficulty learning from there on forward until his adult years or his late teen years. And he kind of impeded himself with his own self-doubt and from the words of others, whether it be his teachers, etc. There's one point that really sticks out. He'll refer to it a lot, where he is having trouble grasping a concept, and the teacher points at him and says, "See, class, that's the boy with the broken brain." And that really sticks with him. And so what does he do? He trudges through school and through life at this point. He's not picking up on things very well. He's doubting himself until he has a turnaround in his life due to some pretty amazing people that are there to support him and through some epiphanies that he goes through. And essentially he starts forcing himself to read while he's going to school, reading other books and really forcing himself into that mold. And then not only really reading just any old book, but he wanted to dabble in the subject of learning itself, right? He didn't want to just read, because he'll say in the book, school a lot of times, and people will teach you or tell you what you should learn, but not how you should learn it, right? So that's kind of an impediment on us through the educational system and such, is that there's a lot of things that we should learn, right, about world history or English or whatever, but we don't really have classes on how to learn most effectively, right? Because everybody learns in different ways and everybody has different motivations and different ways of getting engaged. I know that was a big problem for me when I was younger, is that I was just bored stiff at school, which I'm assuming most of you are as well. And I probably could have done a little better to try and keep myself paying attention and stuff like that. But the point is that there wasn't really anything to cultivate this area of multi-dimensional learning, right? This way of fine-tuning learning to different people so that they could learn most effectively, right? And be able to utilize these skills. It's kind of a cookie cutter system that we have going. So Jim went deep into the trenches to figure out what it meant to learn, how to learn, and how to learn the best ways. He studied other cultures, and now he's been teaching those strategies and the things that he has learned throughout his life for, if I'm not mistaken, the last 25 years. He works with top level athletes, with motivational speakers, entrepreneurs, actors. You see on the front, Will Smith here, left kind of one of the things up top. So Jim knows how to get the maximum out of me as a human being. So you get my point. He works with a lot of influential people and to help them just learn, right? To memorize lines if they're actors, to get their head in the game if they're an athlete, to know how to speak and remember parts of their keynote speech if they're a public speaker, right? How to think outside the box a little bit or in another box completely if you're an entrepreneur, etc. You get my point. So that's a little bit about Jim and his and kind of the foreword and what he'll explain in the beginning of the book. Obviously, it's a little more in depth, and he goes into some of the nitty gritty of his story. It's really inspirational stuff. The book itself, though, is pretty awesome, right? So I was glad to read this, and I would recommend this. Another reason why I'm starting this as one of my first book reviews here is because I believe this is a great gateway book for anyone that wants to start reading, right? And making it a habit and start learning, because once you learn how to learn, right, through the teachings of this book and just in general, everything you read after the fact and everything you try and learn after the fact will be that much easier with some of the things that are implemented through this book. But the lessons are timeless and could benefit you in any way, shape, and form. I know I've taken a lot of things away from it. So three of the major components in the book that he goes through, I believe there's 4 separate parts. One's the introduction, his backstory, but then the 3 other parts, he breaks down into the 3 M's, right? It's called your mindset, your motivation, and your method. And essentially, you need all of these things to be intertwined and working at maximum capacity in order to unlimit yourself, right? To become limitless when it comes to learning. So mindset is pretty self-explanatory when he goes with the first section of the book, or the second section rather, covers mindset. And that is about getting your mind right? Approaching the learning process with a positive outlook and really making the most out of your time while doing it, right? That believing in yourself, saying that I want to do this, I'm motivated to do this, which we'll get into later. But again, mindset here, and all the pitfalls that a lot of people put themselves into. He goes over a lot of the myths when it comes to learning and when it comes to intelligence, just in general, like your intelligence is fixed, which it is not. That knowledge is power per se, not necessarily. Knowledge applied is power, right? When you apply that knowledge, that IQ tests are indicative of where you stand intellectually, because there's different types of knowledge. The point is that a lot of people put themselves down before they even give themselves a shot. And putting yourself in the right mindset is crucial, and the first thing that you need to do in order to approach this learning process, or learning anything in general, in the best way possible. You owe yourself that favor to look at this positively, so that way you can take away from this as much as humanly possible. So that's the first section. The second section, like I said, is motivation. So Jim goes over some of the things to try and motivate you, just in general, right? Like I said, pretty self-explanatory, certain things that you can do, kind of piggybacking off of the mindset, but taking it a little bit further, taking it a couple steps further there. And then the last section is method. So he then takes all of these things that we've learned, through motivation, through mindset, etc., and he gives you a couple methods, right? Some actual tools that you could use to try and enhance your learning process a little bit quicker, right? Tips on studying, tips on memory, tips on thinking itself. All of these methods can be utilized and used once you have the mindset and you have the motivation to do it, to actually enhance your learning and unlimit yourself when it comes to that. So those are the major sections of the book. I also got the audiobook as well, and I listened to the audiobook first before I read the book, which is something that I'm trying to do when I have the time. It can be kind of tough. I'm going to have to start listening to these audiobooks in like 2 times speed or something like that in order to blast through it pretty quick, because I believe this is Jim's first book. So in the audiobook, which I'm glad he did this, but he speaks very slow and he articulates his words like in a very smooth manner. But obviously that makes the book a little bit longer when you're listening to it as opposed to when you're reading it, but you really do understand it. And the great thing about the audiobook here is that he also adds little tidbits of info at the end of each chapter in the form of like a podcast discussion with one of his partners, whose name evades me at the moment, but I believe she's like a comedian, a teacher, a lawyer. She's like a million different things, very positive attitude. And Jim and her will go over the things that were discussed in the chapter prior and how to kind of implement each one of those things on a realistic level, and some further questioning to Jim. So he'll answer some of these questions that a lot of people might have when reading this chapter. How do I implement this? What did you mean by this, etc.? So it sheds a lot of really great light on some of the things that you just learned, really cementing it in your brain there. So the audiobook definitely is great for that reason. The book obviously can't come with a podcast in it. So the audiobook is a great option for anyone too. I recommend doing both personally. And he also includes his website. In the book, I'll have a couple sections where he says, okay, refer to the website if you want to go a little bit deeper on this. Now, you don't have to, which is the beauty in it. So you don't have to feel like you're doing 8 things at once while you're just trying to read or listen to the book. You don't have to. It'll help in certain situations because it'll give you a couple pointers. Like there's a section of the book, I believe it's under motivation, where Jim talks about the 10 big brain foods. So basically nutrition and the foods that have been proven to help brain function. And he goes over one of the ways to try and memorize these foods, right? Because, you might not remember the 10 right off the rip when you read this. And so he'll give you a reference in the resources section of his website to go to say, hey, this is what I'm going to go through, right? This is how we're going to memorize these right now, and let's walk you through it, right? So that's just an example of a couple that he has on his website. You don't have to use it, but it's a great tool and resource, hence the name, if you want to kind of enhance that and be a little more engaged in the book. Because learning, as Jim will say, is a very active process. So if you have the time to do it, highly recommend it. But if not, it's not the absolute end of the world. And speaking of being active, Jim also puts these little things in the book at certain points called Kwik starts, being that his last name is Kwik, and no, that's not made up, which he will tell you that is his legitimate last name. And Kwik starts essentially are little exercises that you could do while you're reading the book. I will say one thing, and I mean this is to be expected after reading it, is that this is definitely an introductory course here, which is probably a good thing because, again, this is a great introductory book for people that want to take a step into reading and learning. And, overcomplicating things would definitely turn people off when it comes to the book, for sure. You need to go into Jim's, master classes and refer to his website to take and pay for some of the courses where, the guy's got to make a living, where he really breaks down some of the stuff and goes really, really in depth. Now, unfortunately, I don't have that kind of cash flow right now to get into that as much as I would love to. But that's kind of the rock and a hard place that you're caught between here, is that if you like the book too much, you'll be a little disappointed at the end, knowing that it's only really just scratching the surface. This is almost like a trailer in a sense. This is almost like a teaser, at least in my mind, of what you're actually capable of, in implementing these steps. But again, all things considered, it's certainly not a waste of your time, because you get a lot of great key takeaways from this book. Even though, to me, it's just kind of a teaser trailer for the main movie, you get a lot. You get a lot from this book. I really got a lot, and I'm excited to implement some of these things in my future learning, for sure. So that is one thing that works for it and against it in that mode. I'm curious to know if Jim's going to... I'm pretty sure Jim is coming out with a couple other books. I think it was 2. It was one that implements it for your children, and then maybe one for business as well. So I'm sure he'll go into a little more fine-tuned things when it comes to your children and business, obviously, past just the individual level. I don't know how in-depth he'll go, because I figure he can't reveal all of his trade secrets in his books. Otherwise, less people are going to buy the courses, right? That's at least the way I see it from Business 101 here. Not that I'm any genius in terms of business. Anyway, that is Limitless. Like I said, the audiobook is fantastic too. So I got it on Audible. So if you want to go for that as well, that might be a good way for you guys. But I do recommend the book as well. Just in general, one of the things that you'll learn in the book or listening to the book is that reading the book physically over an audiobook, for the most part, can provide you with additional benefits as opposed to just listening to it, because you're a little more engaged. I won't spoil that because they'll go in depth with it in the reading. So I definitely recommend buying the book, the physical copy, if you can, and if you have the time to do so. I know some people out there are pretty busy, but definitely I think it's worth it if you can do it. I mean, altogether, I would give this book, if we're going to do a 1 out of 10 scale here, at least an 8, I would say, in the sense that, it's very easy to read. It's very enjoyable to read. It has a lot of great takeaways in it. I was excited to get into it. The audiobook's fantastic. The only downside, again, would be that, unfortunately, it doesn't have the ability to go too in depth on some of the stuff as to spill all the trade secrets. So I don't know what the limit, ironically, of a book like this would be without, kind of giving up too much information, right? So anyway, that is my review of Limitless by Jim Kwik. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you have read this book already, let me know in the comments down below what were some of the standout parts to you when reading this book, what really spoke to you, or what things that you've been implementing, because there's a lot of cool tips and tricks on how to utilize your mind a little bit better and learn better. Also, let me know in the comments down below if you haven't read this but you're debating on reading it now, or if there was anything that through my review gave you some sort of inspiration, or that you learned from this just in general. I'm curious to hear all those thoughts in the comments down below. Anyway, folks, until next time, I will catch y'all on the flip. Out.